Right, so that was a really, really cool insight. And in fact, all right, during your sharing, you actually answered quite a bunch of the questions that I already had prepared in here already. So it's great, right? You covered some of it. I think we do have some questions. Again, once again, folks, if you have any questions for Alvin, please type them in the chat. I know we've got one from Andrew, and we'll get to your question. Okay. So now I'll try to see whether we can cover most of it, and just very, very briefly, let's start with cycling back a little bit, right? So now, obviously, if for those who don't know, and I'm sure already, right? Everyone also knows, all right? Your most recent credit, right? The one that is, really, really got a lot of attention was for Disney's Encanto, right? So let me just read here from this profile here. So it has received more than 15 award nominations, including Golden Globe for Best Animated Feature and Best Original Score. So you yourself, right, Alvin, alongside the Encanto sound team, you won the CAS. CAS stands for Cinema Audio Society Award, right? CAS Award for Outstanding Achievement in Sound Mixing. So I have to say this first on behalf of everyone here. Congratulations. I know you've heard it, right? It's from so many people, right? You've gotten so many interviews from media, both over in the States and here in Malaysia already. But hey, really, sincerely, right? Big congrats to you, okay? Super congratulations. And right now, we done claim lah, okay? Now we can all claim around and say, hey, this one Malaysian,
Yeah.
That's what we love to do lah.
Okay.
But maybe let's just cycle back a little bit, right? When did you grow up?
I grew up in Kuching actually. I like my whole childhood. I grew up in Kuching, and I kind of left the country when I was 23.
And when did you decide to get into a career in music?
Everyone like in some form or another like learn an instrument, and I did. I didn't think I was gonna make it a career. I think I was gonna make it part of my life. The only difference was my family was like, you wanna go, you wanna do it, go study it. And then I moved out here. I moved to I went to school in Boston, and then after school there was like a year of OPT, and that was in like 2013. I moved out to LA and have 1 year, so I'm like, I'm gonna give it a shot, and if I stay, I stay. And that was the point where I kind of, right before I left for LA, I did this, I mixed this score for a video game called Final Fantasy XIII 3, which is like the closing of that, that whole thing. And I was like, oh, this is fun, but like it went from strength to strength. And like a year later in 2014, like Christmas, I got to do a small film that like Pharrell did the music for. And like the composer, she was like, I need you to mix this, but I also need you to mix Pharrell's stems. I'm like, yes, please. So started there, and then and that went to Sundance, and that won an award. I'm like, okay, you know what? I think I can do this. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna try and make this a career. And at that point, I was like, I still wasn't sure, So I would say it's pretty like recent when I thought, okay, this is doable.
So when did you move to Boston, and where did you study? Was it Berkeley?
Yeah, I moved to Boston in 2011. I did music production and engineering. I did in 2 years. Obviously, like still had like the Malaysian community there, and like Rosan's left at that point, but like I kept in touch with him and all that, and learned a lot from these people. And then I went to Berkeley, and then graduated in summer, which is like July of 2013.
For the benefit of everyone, what exactly is the job description of a scoring mixer?
Back in the day, it used to be the guy who was at the board when, like I said, John Williams writes the score, right? The underscore is the orchestral or whatever part that accompanies the picture. In records, right? You don't, back, when Bob Clearmountain was doing it or whatever, they would record it, mix it on the spot, and go and print the tape, and that's it, right? So for scoring mixer, it's the same thing. You get to a stage, a recording stage. It's usually a very, very big hall. You do your 40-piece orchestra or whatever, or you have a big band or whatever, like Al Schmidt, and then you record it and you mix it on the fly, and you print it the tape, and that gets sent to the the dubbing mixers, and they mix it with the dialogue and all that. So that's what a scoring mixer is. But these days, as we know, like even scores now are like, well, it starts kind of catching up, and like music's doing a lot of this. So it's not just orchestral music. It's not just a salsa band. It's like here's an 808, but then here's like, we'll have like Chad Smith on drums, but then we'll have like Tom Morello on guitar, and like, but we'll have an orchestral band, or like, and then we have a woodwind section, but we have a choir from Iceland. And so a lot of it is to kind of combine all of that, and track count gets really large. It's not uncommon to see 600-700 tracks in my sessions. It's a lot. Like the reason I keep so organized as well is just because of that. So being a scoring mixer is just kind of combining all those elements and then presenting it as the underscore.
On like a full length feature or an animated feature, who are the individuals or the persons that you work with?
Right. So it depends, depending on project. Generally, I work with the composer. I'm very kind of involved in their, like, I wrote this score, I want to record these stuff. How do I record it? Then I would act as like the consultant slash the expert that, expert to say, oh, if you want to do this, maybe we have to separate it because, we need this and all that. And like, then we'll have a meeting, and then they go plan it out. Then I work also with a music editor, and a music editor is the person that goes between a composer and a director. They are the ones who, like, if when a composer writes music, you write a piece of music, you're done, right? And sometimes like a picture editor will like have to cut picture, and like, directors like, oh, we need to change these scenes a little too long, or they do a screening and this is too much or whatever. So then you need to cut the music, but you don't want to write more music. You don't need to. It's the music's written. It's just that they cut 2 frames out or something. So the music editor's job is to then figure out how to make that pre-existing piece of music work. And sometimes it's either taking stems, or maybe you like pitch, you time it or whatever. Or sometimes it's like going to the director and say, hey, maybe we can just move this a couple of frames, or things like that. So my job is, after I mix with, like, if you see my template where I have all the stamps, I print the stamps for music, send it off to the music editor, kind of checkerboard the cues, and send it, and they can do what they need to with it. And I guess the other people that I work with is the orchestrator, which is the people on the dub stage, the orchestrator and copyist. And those are the people that takes the composer's composition in MIDI, and then they convert it into tauge, and they figure it out what is right for the right range of each instrument. Then they send it to the copyist, and the copyist then splits it into separate parts that ends up at the bandstand in the session.
That's very useful. So it is a big team, lah, right? I think we showed that was the one that you worked on. That game was a trailer. But when it comes to, let's say, a full length motion picture, do you actually go according to each individual music cue, or do you go to, like, reels and sequences? I've worked on some local motion pictures here before, and they usually send me like a whole reel, like a 20-minute reel. How is it like?
So a lot of it depends on production. In general, when you're dealing with, like, a big team, you want to keep things as organized as possible. So they split it up to reels, like you said. But rather than do 20 minutes, we usually split up to 12 minutes. It's a little more manageable, right? So once you have like reels, then you go reel 1, reel 2, reel 3. Usually it's like 5 or 6 reels, depending on how long the movie. Like, I think we did this one film we did, there was like 8 reels or 9 reels, and that's like crazy, but because it was a long movie, 3-hour movie. And then you split up the cues based on like the time code of it. So like I said, back in my session, the 1 hour is where the kind of MIDI map starts. For a feature, what you do for each cue is you create individual sessions for that, and you have individual tempo maps throughout. Because it's harder to go, here is, this kind of up and flow and all that, but then you move like 20 minutes down the line, and then you do another like time, like a different tempo and all that. It's quite chaotic. Some people do it, then they have like one long thing. File size isn't necessarily the hardest thing in the world, but then if you add on, like, okay, what if we bring in the idea of sample rate? Then if it's 96K, and then we're doing 32-bit float, and then we're doing like, we're doing 5/1, but we're doing 5/1 stems. So we have 15 stems. So 15 5/1 stems is what, 90 tracks and 96K 32-bit. The file size starts getting really hard. And the problem with file size being big is not the idea of no dry space. The problem is when you're dealing with multiple systems. You have a picture editor that's working, let's say, in like Shah Alam, and one guy is in like Malacca. And you have to go back and forth, and you're sending this back and forth every day, even with the fastest system in the world. There is still actual physical time to do that. And you're talking about that multiplied by picture and all that. So you try to keep it as concise in terms of clips wise to like the length of the score, and then maybe keep like a 2 or 4 bar handle at the beginning and the end of the cue, so that in case like you want to reverb tail or you want to do something a reverse rise into the cue, you can do that. But I don't recommend doing the whole thing as a piece of music, and like even you have blank space, you keep it in.
Good piece of advice there. So according to to each individual cue lah. Yeah. What do you do differently if, let's say, you showed us the one which was for a trailer, or what would you do differently if it's, say, for film or TV, or for games?
For games, they're very strict about their loudness standards. Like -16, 96K 24-bit. If not, we'll reject it immediately. Like the people in Japan are very strict about that. And they send it beforehand, so you kind of have to keep it. Like League of Legends is slightly different. I don't remember the number. I don't have the numbers on the top of my head. So I know when it comes to that, it's like, okay, if you want me to do that, I'm happy to do that. Because like, I think there's a certain way they kind of run that, so that's fine. With film, in general, I do it in surround, because I think it's a cinematic thing. You want to kind of feel the music around you. Whether it's 5.1, 7.1, that's a matter of personal choice. I still think that music should always be 5.1. 7.1, unless you're doing an Atmos mix, feels kind of like overkill. It's like, bringing a Rolls Royce into a bicycle race. It's like, yeah, sure, you could do that, but like, why, And then with TV is very fast paced. Like when they dub, I use the word dub as like when you do the re-recording mix, they have 2 days to do it, meaning they have 2 days for dialogue, sound effects, and music. And usually they do it in stereo, and they they handle it all. Whereas like with a film, you can spend 3 weeks on it. You can dub it for 3 weeks, because like you have time to go through each reel. You do your pre-mix, you do your dialogue pass, you do your sound effects pass, you do your music pass. And back in the day, it used to be 3 people at the dub stage: the music guy, the sound, the dialogue guy, and the sound effects guy. And these days, the music guy just gets left into the room. So, like on West Side Story, I think the guy was on the stage, or like, I forgot what movie it was. They are actually at the stage, and they have this like giant long, you see one of those long consoles, and one guy has one machine, and the guy has one machine, and the guy has one machine. They have 4,000 voices there for you to use. So then you have your own machine to kind of do that. And you can do all of it at the same time. But nowadays, I have to anticipate that. So when I deliver for TV, I just make sure that it's usually like a little lower in volume. It's not music heavy, so I kind of I deliver it about 6 dB lower than I normally would with like a film thing. Because a film thing, you keep a lot of dynamics. With TV, you want to consider that if it heads to streaming, everyone's going to be on TV, and you just have that. You don't really have control over the final consumption method of thing, because someone's on their iPhone or whatever. And then for mobile video games, then I'm limiting it to -5 or to Kingdom Come. It's not right, but it's not gonna pass the directors. They'll be like, this is not loud enough. So everything has its own thing, and it always comes down to dynamic range. It comes down to amount of stems, and it comes down to how wide I'm gonna go with the processing.
That actually answers 2 or 3 questions that I have already. So that's excellent.
Awesome.
Yeah. Let's go to Anand. Anand, Andrew, actually, right? Shout out to you, Anand. Thanks for your question. So he had a question, right? So he said, having to mix down to YouTube, right? For YouTube, the LUFS is actually, if I'm not actually, it's actually now -14 LUFS.
Right.
So Anand's question is, do you make the primary adjustment on the print master or through the individual tracks? Okay, I'm trying to sort of decipher this question. So
Right.
meaning, do you hit the levels only on the final master or through balancing the individual tracks itself?
Um, yeah, I mean that's a very tricky question, right? Because
Mm,
I think the one thing that I think we all have to learn, and I'm still learning, is monitoring. I know it's kind of coming out of left field that like um, you know, what that means. Because what I've learned, kind of my own personal journey into this world is, and you can ask anyone who came out as an assistant and then like, they assist people and then they kind of come out. If you don't have good monitoring, you do not know what's too loud. You do
mm,
not know what's too soft, right? If your speakers are too soft, everything's gonna sound too loud when you turn it up. So I always say calibrate your speakers. And when I mean calibrate your speakers, know where 85 dB is. Like, 85 dB is say, minus 13 or minus 14 on your white noise. If you ping your room, like it should sound that way. No matter what, the level on your speakers don't go up or doesn't go down. So whatever you're putting into your speakers will always come out at that level. So you like, if something's too loud, you really know it's too loud. Obviously, there's other components to that, which is like, frequency of the room, if there's any notes, if there's any of that. And like, I'm no acoustician, so I don't know. I frankly do not want to learn about that. I don't have the brain space.
mm,
I'm not that intelligent to calculate all that stuff. But I think at the bare minimum, you need to know how loud your room is, number one. Then number two, so when it comes to what you're saying and trying to decipher what you're saying, I'm assuming what you're asking is, do I just turn down the master fader or do I turn down all individual tracks? Well, I can turn down the master fader. The question is, like me using Pro Tools, master faders are pre-faders, meaning the level is not the level going out into the mix. The level is the level going into all your plugins. So theoretically, I'm turning all my tracks down as well if I'm using a master fader and bringing it down. And that's very similar. If not, I would say almost the same as bringing it down as a VCAs and turning everything down, which is almost the same as, which is slightly different, but like turning it down on your auxes, which is kind of similar to putting a trim onto before your limiters and turning that down. DAWs are very intelligent these days. They calculate and make up for if you clip a little bit. I mean, you see yellow, you see red on my sessions all the time. I'm not advocating for that. I'm also advocating for great gain staging. I am still learning to do it well. I'm coming from a place where I started learning how to follow the rules. You got to like gain stage it right and all that. My mixes wasn't translating properly, and then you learn under someone, you cut your teeth under someone, and then they show you like they break all the rules, and they're like, yeah, mine's clipping, and I'm like 12 dB, and like it's all red for the whole time, but like it sounds incredible, and you're like, I don't get it. So then you have to kind of recalibrate and break those rules and learn to do all these things just to get your point across, like mix wise. And then you come back from that and you learn that that's great. How can I make it even better now that I understand the other side of it? So it is a journey, but I would say you can turn everything down. What I would do is, if like I put in a lot of levers in place where like if it's too loud, I turn down the BCAs. If it messes in my mix, then I turn it down my auxes. And if it still messes in my mix, then I turn it down my mix bus. So all this like extra level of organization is just so that I'm not worried if I need to. I could essentially still do none of that and Pro Tools would be fine. I could redline everything. Well, almost everything, but like, I could have like redline every other bar or something, and like you can deliver it, and like 95% of the world be like, oh yeah, this sounds fine. But like, it's not great because you know that like it degrades a little bit. Like having all this kind of checkpoints helps. Trims are a helpful way. Colorless gain, so a gain knob or a gain thing is great. And sometimes it could be an EQ thing. Like I get recordings all the time of like people, especially with COVID now, everyone records at home. And like sometimes they don't realize that some things don't go below 300 hertz, but they have all this like low end stuff that builds up, and they like try to multi-track themselves because like, we like stacking ourselves. So we'll do 5 vocal stacks, pass one, pass two, pass three, and that low end starts heading out. And you high pass that and you suddenly realize, oh wait, actually it's not too loud. It's just that thing that was hitting the limiter, hitting the whatever. So this is a long-winded way of saying that kind of doesn't really matter where you turn it down as long as you know what you're doing and your gain staging is right. It's fine.
Hopefully that answers your question, Anand. And I think that's a really, really good point. And it just so happened to be coincidentally, I also just recently had that question, about, levels. And I guess everyone's sort of asking, and the point you made about calibrating your monitoring level, really, really important. That's really vital. Maybe a couple more questions that I have here. So, where do you usually do your mixes? Do you have right? It's a two-part question. Do you have a
Right.
favorite mix room?
So I came up kind of very scrappy. Like I didn't, I can't afford, I wasn't able to afford a room coming up. You know what I mean? Like I worked for a boss who was a record producer. He produced Pink. He did he did the Pixies. He did Stereophonics. He just did the new Stereophonics album. Then he did he's done a lot, but he's also mixed with film scores. And he has his own room. So he was very kind when I first came up to let me use his room when he was not mixing. So I learned from him, and I was working on KRK E8Bs for the longest time. Love those speakers, but then kind of graduated. I work out of the Village Recorder, which is a spot in West LA. They did like the Chronic, like when I came up, I was very fortunate for people to support me. I met Ed Cherney at the Village. I met, John Olagia, who's John Mayer's producers at the Village, and all these people. And they were just the kindest people to me because they're like, you're cool. You're not pretentious. Like there's no bullshit here. You're just trying to like learn. So I did. And they've been very like kind of accepting and supportive of me. So when I first could like afford to rent a studio, I rented it at the Village. I love working there. They have a lot of history. If there was one place, I would say that's my favorite right now. I've worked out of a couple like Sunset Sound, United. I just recorded at United in Nashville like November last year. Coolest place, greatest mic collection in the world. I had 5 C12s, and one of this like session, I didn't know what to do with them, so I just randomly placed them in the drum room, and it was like Danny Gottlieb, and I was like, sure, let's see how they sound. I was just solving it, like they all sound great. So love that studio. But my favorite mix room now is my space here, right? And I just got this space. I put up, I wish I can show it to you guys, but maybe I can upload some photos, send it to you. And I just got this space this year after Encanto, and I was like, you know what? I need to set up space so that I can I think you can see there's a couch there, and there's coffee and like things, and I can make this my own. And it is my favorite space right now. But if my original spot would be the Village Recorder, and if you look it up, it's a very cool space. I like Studio D a lot. I did a lot of Mulan in Studio D. I mixed, I think, 2 albums there. I mixed 1 album in Studio A. I mixed another film in Studio F. They converted one of the rooms into T-Bone Burnett's room. They're trying to make it Atmos as well. The room that that Ed Cherney was, in before they treated me like family to the point where when Ed Cherney passed away, they called me and it's at 7 a.m. They're like, oh my God, the manager Tina, she called me kind of in tears. I'm like, it was heavy because I feel very kind of connected to them. And I think my point is that it has less to do with the gear and more to do with the people. And if you can build a community like that, I think that's the most important part.
Thanks for the insights, man. So another question: do you use any reference mixes?
Nowadays, less so because I'm very familiar with what I know. The only time I use reference mixes is when I'm going to a new room because I don't know how it sounds, but I bring my own speakers, so that makes it easy. I do. The Daft Punk album is one of my favorite albums. The Bruno Mars record, any Bruno Mars record that Servant Gane mixed, is fantastic. I was a big Chic fan because I think was that Bob Clearmountain or someone, or was it the Chic stuff I love. And the AC/DC album, the Back in Black album, that's one of my reference mixes. Honestly, any Back was a great reference album for me as well. Um, yeah, I think Daft Punk was a big one. The 2008, the one with Pharrell, that album was very big for me as a reference mix. And then for electronic stuff, I don't really have like I'm not too entirely whatever. Beyonce's album was great. But then I'm like, yeah, I can just talk to you and ask you guys how it's supposed to sound. So yeah, those are my reference mixes.
Since you mentioned you are in your new room, what the speakers are you using?
So I don't know if I can angle too much, but if you see the rears here, they're ATCs. I have 5 ATCs in a 5.1 configuration, and I have a sub that I'm borrowing. I'm not like sure if it's big enough for the room yet. Like I said, I moved in 4 months ago, 3 months ago. So they're ATC 25s. They sound great. I need a little more full range than like let's say the 226s, which are the PMCs and all that. So far the ATCs have been my favorites that I like, but I'm not advocating for one over the other. I'm advocating for however you can hear the mixes as obviously to you as possible.
Being for AES, right? Being this is an AES thing, that is like a compulsory question to ask, like, oh, what
Of
speakers you're
course,
using?
yeah.
Because everyone's here are all an engineer or it's like
Right.
an audio nerd, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the frequency? No, I totally get it. I do like the ATCs, and if I can afford them, I'm not at the part of my career where like I've done this for like 20, like when I went into Encanto, everyone was 15 years older than me. That speaks volumes to like the caliber of people that I had to kind of keep up with. So, I obviously clearly made it out alive, joking aside. But like, I learned a lot about myself, and like I learned that, there are things that I'm starting to prefer and all that. Um, I do really like the ATCs right now, but I am not sold on them, and I don't know if I can spend $100,000 on them. If I'm going to do a 5.1 or whatever.
And it segues very nicely into my next question, actually, right?
Mm.
So, you're working on a big Disney or big Hollywood project, right? It must have its own share of pressures, right? Its own share of like intense moments, and some of these pressures they can come from either external, right? External pressures, or sometimes perhaps even internal ones. How do you deal with these, either internal or external pressures?
I have my morning routine. I believe in work life like integration, meaning that I don't think, I always talk about the 2:30 like nap at Wednesdays afternoon. I just don't think there's a way to do this where like, it's gonna be 9 to 5 and that's it. And then like if I work longer, I'm gonna get overtime. It's like, no, sometimes you gotta wake up 6 o'clock, get it done, leave, go have a little bit of breakfast, and then I would like for me workouts are important, so I go to the gym, and that helps me out with like handling stress and all that. I don't take things too hard. When stress is high, the only thing you can do is just like kind of buckle down, just do it. But if you don't let it get to you, I know it's easier said than done, but like if you don't let it get to you and a little bit of therapy, I think it's fine. It's like as long as you're able to kind of like, part of it of us talking right now is like therapy, right? It's like we're able to kind of just say, yeah, it was shitty, but we got through it. So I think having a good like kind of good team of people to work with. I surround myself with everyone that I work with being very like respectful and very easy to work with. And I think that was one of the biggest kind of help to not having the pressure get to me.
That's awesome, and work life balance is definitely important, lah. Yeah.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
one's big,
So
big, big.
as much as hey, but I'm sure, right? Uh, for anyone who's starting out, there's always the hustle. Yeah, you got to hustle, hustle, hustle. But eventually, when you get to a point, you got to realize that you need a bit of a work-life balance as well.
Yeah, especially when family comes. I mean, like I'm quite sure JD, like when there's family and all that, like then it's a whole different story. And like I'm about to enter that kind of phase of my wife is in the industry as well, and so she we're trying to we're trying to have. Sorry, give me a moment. So I'm really really sorry. I think this because I'm in a shared space, so I think some my my kind of co-space workers are trying to leave, but like just sorry, give me like a minute. All right?
No worries. Okay. Hey everyone. Yep. Like Alvin just taking a quick break, and I know we've got a couple of questions here from Darren, Yihong, and Anand as well, and we'll wrap this up with last question, right? Regarding any of career advice for any aspiring audio engineers and producers. Okay. Right. So,
Okay, sorry guys, I'm back.
welcome back.
um,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, thank you. Sorry,
Yeah.
it was just I work with a couple of pretty like this is a shared space. Like I said, everyone has their own room. The guys across the hall, they like he has a giant room. they came up they came up under Tony Maserati. So they were there during like the Jason Mraz, the Beyonce albums and all that. And then they kind of went off on their own. Like the and we will talk about that in the career, but there's a record producer that works underneath and he works nights and he has his drums in his room and all that. Similar size, um, writes a lot of hits for pop artists and indie pop. So like we have a thing where like at any time like someone leaves or whatever, we're like, oh, we're leaving and all that. So they just was checking in. But that's that. And kind of back to your question, I think yeah, having a balance and having my wife in the same industry, I'm like, yeah, I totally get it. Like having that good balance. That's all I had to say.
That's great. And I think let's wrap it up with actually, you're right. This is actually a question which a couple of people have asked in the chat, but this is my final would be. It's a stereotypical question, but still valuable anyway, right? What advice would you like to give, right, to any one of us who's watching this right now, or maybe later in the replay, especially if you're an aspiring audio engineer coming up?
My advice has always been to don't knock it till you try it. I guess just be open to making mistakes. Learn to be like, I was just on an interview right before this, kind of chatting with some friends, and like they were like asking what's the biggest skill you can take away from this that you can kind of translate to everything else. And for me, I think the one of the biggest skill is communication, like effective communication. And when I mean communication, I don't mean like I am lifting my arms, I am going, it's like it's not that. It's more about like trying to get your message across. Like when you see someone's visibly upset in a session, be it an artist, be it a director, be it a songwriter, and they're yelling at you, do you A, just storm out, or B, kind of take it like like a frustrated person, or C, find a way to sort it out, like find a way to work through it and get your idea across and say, hey, I hear you, here's what we need to do, let's do this, or there's this option. And I think if you are able to do that, I think that will take you very far. That's number one. Effective and effective communication and just being able to convey your ideas. And sometimes it doesn't have to be words. Sometimes it could be like everyone's just yelling and running around and like, oh my God, like this is the last day, we have to finish this. And all you have to do is just be the calming presence. That's so communicating in body language that you are the person or whatever. So that's number one, effective communication. Number two is being a close collaborator. And what I mean by that doesn't mean that you do the work for people, but it also doesn't mean that you're like, if I don't get paid, I'm not doing another revision or whatever, or like whatever. Like, it's like I mean, you have to get paid, but like sometimes payment doesn't come in monetary form. So rather than just trying to see it that way, see it as a all-encompassing career, right? Think about it as like, my experience of this is my first film, I got paid very little money that it didn't even enable me to do a lot of that money. Like I had to survive. Like I couldn't survive more than a month with that. But I did that. And from that project, I got Encanto, like indirectly. You know what I mean? So it's never a like, oh, you need to pay me for my service right now, and this is what it is. If you see a kind of overarching like destination later on, then figure out how to make it work, but don't compromise your like well-being, obviously. So there's a balance of that. Being a collaborator means that like someone brings something to you, see how you can don't just like, I'm gonna put the mic and I'm done. It's like No, let's put the mic, then let's figure out if the part is right. If the part's not right, let's figure out if the songwriting is not right. Let's go figure out if the songwriting is not right because the key is not right. As engineers and as producers especially, the name of the game is solving problems. And if you can be the most effective communicator and the best collaborator, people will keep coming back to you. And that's when you can say, hey, love that you want to come back to me. I need to pay my rent and I want to make this a career. So how can we make this work for both of us? So that's my two biggest thing that I feel has taken me very far and has enabled me to sustainably grow myself without compromising my values, and also being able to somewhat make a living and not like trying to see this as like, oh, like this is just a hobby kind of thing. So yeah, I think that there's that collaboration and communication aspect that I think we don't talk enough about.
Those are really, really wise words of wisdom, man.
Thank you. I think it's important. I don't think it gets talked about enough. People are like, oh, you got to hustle and all. Like, yeah, of course you got to hustle. Like we've done the 5 a.m. or like the 3 a.m. or whatever, but like that's easy words to talk about. It's that during that 3 a.m. part where you're kind of falling asleep, someone wants to do another take. How do you handle it? It's those moments that we have to try to figure out. Or it's like, if you can't make rent next month, how do you make this work? And what is the situation? You have a gig that pays $100 and a gig that pays $1,000. The $100 will lead you somewhere else. The $1,000 will lead you somewhere else. Can you do both? Or is there a way that you find something to bring in? Like there's all this like kind of small little things I wish I knew about. And like I would want to hear that when I was younger. And the other thing, I know this bears like not saying, but like you don't know what you don't know until you know it, So be as helpful without compromising your safety. Like I don't know how to elaborate on that yet, because like I'm still organizing my thoughts on like things that I want to hear if like I was starting out. But yeah, always be the one that's helping out and solving the problems.
That's a great place to sort of wrap up and end this,
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So, what's next that's in store? Okay, cheating. This is a bonus question. Is there something that we want that maybe we can look forward in the near future? Something which, of course, that you can talk about, that you can share, something that for us that okay, we gotta go to the theaters to go and catch this. Right. Is there something that's coming up soon?
I mean, Top Gun's the next one. I think that's the closest. So I think that comes out end of May.
Correct. Yeah.
Yes.
May 26th.
I was like kind of still in the mix prep, not like the main mixer kind of thing. So I don't want to overstate my position in that, but I held the two mixers together because they, like both of them were in London. We had two mixers on that project because it was just so much music. Go check that out. And then, if you kind of stay, like if you keep in touch with me, like my Instagram is Wee the Walrus, WEE the Walrus. I have like I try to keep my friends updated about things. I do have a couple of things that's like very, very exciting coming up. Like I don't talk about it until someone else talks about it, kind of thing. So like it's just one of those, like labels and studios are always like, yeah, no, this never happened. This is not here. But no, there's a lot of fun stuff coming up, and I do want to share it with everyone, and hopefully we can come back and chat about it a little bit more, and maybe talk a little bit more about like maybe talk about a big band session, and we can open that up and see how it sounds in surround.
That would be very, very cool. I mean, there's so much thing, definitely a lot of interesting things in what you're doing and what you feel, that we just can't cover everything within this this single session, man. That is super, super awesome. And hey, hopefully we can get you back again, for another session with our AES members here. Yeah.
Absolutely, I would love that. Yeah, thank you for having me, man.
Yeah, so check out, well, leave all the later on this video will be available on a replay as well. Everything will post it up on the AES Malaysia Facebook page. So I guess let's stay tuned and start booking the seats for Top Gun, right? Get into the danger zone, right? And let's listen to it, and maybe it will take your breath away. You know,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
These
there's a
are not.
Gaga track. The Gaga track just came out, so that one that's cool. You know.
All right, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. What these are all Top Gun and 80s references, lah. So if you are a certain age, and I think you'll get it, but
Yeah.
if you're young, you have not watched the original Top Gun, you might not get these references. Awesome, man. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Alvin, right, for your
Yeah.
time. And for everyone else as well, okay, thank you so much. I appreciate you joining in this little afternoon session, right, with Alvin here. On behalf of AES Malaysia, the committee, and all the members as well, once again, thank you so much. Now, if anybody wants to sort of hang around for maybe another 15-20 minutes, we can do so. You can turn on your cameras, you can turn on your microphones, and we can still chit chat. But if everyone has got to go off to do something else, all right, please do so. And don't want to keep you. Thank you so much, Alvin, for your time. All right, and hopefully we will catch up again real soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Yeah, do reach out if there's anything, and I'm always happy to help.
Most likely, right? I'll definitely follow you, right? I do follow you on your Instagram and
Yeah.
your Facebook. I love your food reference and food analogies, by the way. It's it's really, really
Have
funny.
to lah.
Yeah.
If you're Malaysian, right, it's all
Yes.
about the food lah. Like I definitely that's the one thing I do miss. Like there's a Ipoh coffee shop that's open like maybe like 12, 15 miles like east from us. So
Okay.
I go with like my friend Rendra. Like we like, hey dude, let's go. And so we kind of drive out there, and that's our thing.
Yeah.
But like we're definitely. I'm definitely due for a back home. Like I gotta do a food tour, lah, but that's eventually.
Yeah. Borders are open already, so hopefully we see you back again.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Here.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Thanks again. I should get going, but like, again, it's great chatting, and stay in touch, man.
All right. Take care, Alvin.
All right, see you, Jade.
All right. See you.